Hey. Time for the Out of This World story from rSpace. Actions meet consequences. You two should chat. Today on rSpace, watch a self-proclaimed queen lose her throne, her friends, her backup plan, and her housing arrangement, all because she couldn't resist treating her marriage like a clearance rack. Wife cheated on me because I wanted luxury. I leaked her group chat and left her with no friends. My wife, 28 female, and I, 29 male, have only been married for 2 years. There were some ups and downs, but it was a good 2 years mostly. I would have had no complaints if not for the spectacular train wreck it became at the end. I always thought our relationship was built on mutual understanding and respect. We both took an equal part in running the household in our own way. I did my part in the upkeep of the house, and she contributed what she could to cover our bills and financial goals. So I never realized when she gradually started becoming unhappy with her doing her part in keeping things running at home. Overnight, she went from taking pride in maintaining a clean and beautiful home to complaining anytime she had to do more than the bare minimum. I didn't realize it at the time how social media had poisoned her. You know, all those so-called influencers who spout trendy nonsense as if it's hard fact? That always pissed me off. Apparently, my wife was dumb enough to fall for that crap. It was heartbreaking to find out, because I'd always regarded her as someone who was too smart to fall for that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I was wrong. The first time she started showing signs of being brainwashed was when she accused me of being controlling because I expected her to prepare dinner on the weekend. This was something she'd done every week since we got married, and she never complained about it. She actually used to say that it made her happy to see how much I enjoyed her meals. Now she was complaining that I was taking advantage of her by expecting a home-cooked meal all the time. That took me by surprise. I reminded her that she was the one who had started this tradition, and she'd never voiced her discomfort about it to me. I honestly didn't know where this was coming from. That was when she started spewing off all the reasons that I was supposedly a horrible husband. She claimed I expected too much from her, and that I was supposed to treat her like a queen. She didn't expect us to slave over a stove all day when I wasn't giving her the luxury she deserved. According to her, she wasn't supposed to be working, cooking, or cleaning. A real man handled all of the house's needs with money. I was speechless at first. Like I said, my wife was normally a very sensible woman, and hearing this from her felt like she'd been replaced with a complete stranger. This was a woman who I knew I was working on building a business, and swore she'd be with me every step of the way. We'd spent late nights discussing plans and figuring out how we'd both build ourselves up and attain the life we dreamed of. And here she was saying I owed her luxury. But she wasn't done. She kept going, and each line sounded like a soundbite. That was when I started to suspect that she was just parroting talking points that she'd gotten from social media. Some of the gems she'd picked up were that I was not leading enough, and I wasn't providing the lifestyle she was manifesting. I felt like I was arguing with a podcast host. I pushed back and asked her where all this was coming from. I pointed out that she'd never communicated any of this to me, and it didn't even sound like her. She said she'd been studying healthy relationships and doing research, and she realized she wasn't getting what she deserved as a woman. We really got into it, and she refused to acknowledge that she was being unreasonable. I refused to give in to her ridiculous demands. I could hardly sleep that night because I knew her new worldview was unhealthy for our marriage. I didn't want it to end, but I wasn't going to give in to her ridiculous demands either. I didn't give up on her, though. I checked out her following lists on social media and found out which accounts were giving her this bad info. If I knew all their arguments, I thought I'd be able to figure out a way to counter them. I was surprised to see that most of these accounts were run by young women with no concept of how relationships worked in the real world. These were 19-year-olds looking for Disney romances. They were living in a fantasy, and they were dragging my wife down with them. It seemed like it was working for a while. When she started bringing up her ideas, I would try to shoot them down with the arguments I'd prepared. Sometimes she'd insist that she was right, but sometimes she seemed to listen to me. I felt like I was making progress. Slow progress, but still progress. And then I found out that it was all an act. I was going through the latest videos on one of these accounts, scrolling through the comments to see what people thought about them, when something caught my eye. The girl in the video was defending women in relationships keeping another man as a backup in case the main one couldn't meet all of their needs. It was disgusting stuff. The comments were a mix of people supporting it and people who were calling it out for being stupid. What caught my eye was that my wife was tagged in one of the comments. The comment was simple, but it said a lot. It was just a winking emoji. My wife replied with 2 emojis of her own, one winking and then one laughing. It was innocent on the surface, but I was sure I could tell what they were really saying. The other person, who I recognized as her friend, Lori, after I went through her pictures, was winking because she knew my wife was doing exactly what the post talked about. My wife's reply was jokingly telling her to keep a secret. I knew there was a possibility that I was reading too much into it, but somehow I was certain I was right. Her recent behavior, the accounts she was following, it all just added up. I stared at those emojis for a long time, while the weight of my discovery started to sink in. I really wanted to believe I was wrong. I kept trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. I was just stressed from the changes in my marriage, and I was looking for a way to blame her. But I knew I was just in denial. I didn't say anything when she got home that day. What could I say? After I brought up the comment, she just claimed it was completely harmless, and then turned things on me for going through her social media activity. The most I could do was screenshot the comments so she couldn't deny it when I finally confronted her. It was hard pretending everything was normal that night, especially since I started noticing the signs of her affair. I'd already noticed that she was on her phone more often, but I assumed it was because she was watching TikTok. Now I realized she was laughing even when her phone was silent. Even worse, she was always subtly angled her phone away from me, even when I was across the table from her. It was like she was subconsciously trying to keep me from finding out what she was up to, so naturally, I had to do some digging. Over the next week, I went into her phone on several occasions while she was in the shower. She had so many contacts on her phone that it was hard to find out which one of them was her affair partner at first. I had to start off by checking her messages with Lori instead. That was where I found my first solid evidence that she'd been having an affair. I found a group chat that she had with some of her friends, including Lori. They talked about a lot of different things, but what interested me the most was what they said about their relationships. Most of them were married, and they all seemed bitter about it. It was like an echo chamber of misguided women reassuring each other that they deserved the world without having to lift a finger. The most concerning part was that they were all discussing cheating like it was nothing. That was where I found out that my wife was sleeping with a guy named Victor. She bragged that he was perfect for her. He didn't expect anything from her. He spent money on her, and all she had to do was sleep with him. It was a better deal than what she got with me, according to her. Reading that might have been one of the most painful things I've ever done. All this time, I thought there was a chance of saving our relationship, and she was just looking at it in terms of what she could gain. The person portrayed in these messages was completely different from the woman I thought I loved. I couldn't get over the fact that she said she had a better deal with him than she did with me. Did she really think I viewed our relationship as a transaction? I wanted to build a home, a business, and a future with her, but she thought sleeping with another guy for money was a better deal. It disgusted me. The rest of the group chat was just as sick. She and Lori were basically encouraging the other women in the group chat to upgrade. One of the women asked if she ever planned to leave me, and she said she'd stick around for a while because marriage still had its perks. That line flipped a switch in me. She didn't even respect me as a person. I was just a wallet to her, and she had another on the outside. I stopped feeling bad for myself and got angry instead. I decided at that very moment that I was done with her, and I wouldn't spend another ounce of my energy trying to fix things. I've talked to a lawyer about filing for divorce. He said that the text messages were a good start, but it didn't really confirm an affair. It could be argued that she was just joking around, or even lying to impress her friends. Fortunately, he has an investigator that he uses for situations like this, and he's been following her around to gather proof of her affair. I won't say anything to her until the PI comes back with results. I'm doing my best not to let her know I have a clue. I don't want to spook her and make it impossible to get proof. It might sound weird that I'm actively waiting for my wife to sleep with her affair partner, but she's not really my wife anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she's already my ex. She just doesn't know it. The way she pivoted from, "I love cooking for you," to, "I deserve to live like Cleopatra while doing absolutely nothing." Delusional. It's amazing what happens when you give someone an internet service, but not enough critical thinking skills to operate it. Then the affair with Victor, the man who apparently hands out cash and chlamydia like he's running a 2-for-1 promo. Incredible. And then that group chat. An entire coven of women who hate their marriages but won't leave because DoorDash isn't free unless someone else's credit card pays for it. Absolutely inspirational stuff. Update. There was a lot of interest in my first post, so I knew I had to come back and deliver the update once everything had played out. I kept up the act until the PI came back with proof of her affair. Pictures of the two of them heading into fancy restaurants and hotels for their dates, practically wrapped around each other. Seeing the proof made it hurt all over again, but I was just more mad than heartbroken this time. I felt like I didn't have the luxury of moping and feeling sorry for myself. I told her I wanted a divorce the next day. She had the nerve to look surprised and asked where this was coming from. So I told her all of it. I knew about her affair, and I'd seen her group chat. I knew how she and her friends took their husbands for granted and talked about finding backup men to fulfill their different needs. She did an excellent job of denying the whole thing. First, she started crying, saying I was completely misunderstanding the whole situation. She said those were just jokes between friends, and she was sorry if I thought they were real. Then she got angry and said I'd violated her trust by going through her phone. If not for the proof, I would have thought she might be telling the truth. I didn't let the emotional fireworks shake me. I told her to cut the act and showed her copies of the photos. Her face fell only for a second before she went back to complete denial. She asked me if I'd considered the possibility that he was someone she'd met through work. She said I knew that she had lunch with clients on behalf of her company. She also reminded me that she went to conferences and that a lot of them were held at hotels. I knew she would say that, and I was already prepared. I asked her what her company would say if I called to figure out if the man was a client of theirs. I knew they weren't likely to tell me anything, but that was enough to get her to hesitate. Then I pointed out the obvious. The pictures were obviously romantic. You wouldn't walk into a hotel wrapped around a client's arms. It was clear that she was full of crap, but that didn't stop her. She completely refused to admit that she'd done anything wrong. I wasn't surprised, and it didn't matter much either way. I didn't care what she said, because I wasn't going to stick around. I told her that I would be moving out that same day, and she would receive the divorce papers soon. When she saw that I was serious about leaving, she completely changed. She still didn't admit to the affair, but she started trying to get me to change my mind. She said we could talk and figure things out. She even said she would find a new job if I was uncomfortable with her clients. That made me laugh. She was trying so hard to keep me around while still holding on to her lie. I told her that she should be glad because I was giving her a chance to stay with the man who gave her a better deal. I knew she recognized her own words by the small grimace she gave. I left the same day and completely froze her out. I didn't respond to any of her calls or texts. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. It's not like I was ever planning to forgive her, but she wasn't even ready to acknowledge that there had been an affair in the first place. There was no point in keeping touch. After that, I only saw her during the divorce proceedings. Despite her claims that she'd never had an affair, everyone agreed with the PI's report. It was obvious that the two of them were romantically involved, no matter how much she tried to deny it. I feel like that played a big part in helping me get a fair settlement. We ended up dividing our assets evenly, and I didn't end up giving her anything that I didn't feel she deserved. She didn't even end up getting alimony. During the divorce, my lawyer informed me that one of the reasons she might have been waiting on the divorce was because she wanted to be eligible for alimony. At the moment, she wasn't entitled to anything because we hadn't been married long enough. He said she was probably planning to stick around for a few more years. He guessed at least 4, so that she would be able to get 2 or 3 years of spousal support out of me. It would have been worse if we had a child in that time. The thought of it almost made me shudder. Now, for the people who wanted me to tell their friends' husbands about what they were getting up to in the group chat, don't worry. That happened. I waited until the divorce was done because I didn't want to screw myself over. But once we'd gone our separate ways, I got started. It took most of an afternoon, but I went through the chat transcripts that I emailed myself, and I picked out all the relevant messages from her friends. Then I found each of their partners on Facebook, which was the harder part. I only knew 2 of them personally. Some of the others were easy to find because of their profiles were full of family photos and anniversary posts. A few took a bit more digging, but I found them all eventually. I didn't send any long messages or emotional rants about cheating wives. I just attached the chat transcripts and added a short message explaining that the messages came from a group chat their wives were in, and they deserved to know what they really thought of them. The responses varied. Some didn't reply at all, but I could see that the messages had been read. The rest texted back and asked if I was for real. One of them even called me, and his voice was shaking. I promised them all that the messages were legit, and I told them I had no reason to lie. I explained that my ex-wife was also in the messages, admitting to her affair, and that we were now divorced. The fallout was huge. Within a few days, I found out that the group chat had imploded. The men I talked to had started confronting their wives. Not all of them had admitted to having affairs in the chat, but they'd all said some things that made their husbands unhappy. Lori, my ex's closest friend, was hit the hardest. She was one of the other women who had confirmed that she was having an affair. Along with my ex, she was also one of the women encouraging the others to cheat. Her husband didn't waste any time in kicking her out of the house and filing for divorce. The worst part is that Lori is pregnant. He is insisting on a pregnancy test and she keeps refusing. She swears that the child is his. I feel bad for him, but I don't regret letting him know. My ex tried to reach out after that. She tried getting me through calls at first, but I never picked them up. Eventually, she sent a string of angry paragraphs. 10 or more different walls of text over the span of a week. They switched between angry rants and self-pity. Not a single message took accountability for the part she and her friends played in ruining their own lives. I skimmed through most of them. I don't have a problem with reading long messages, but the self-righteous in them annoyed me. Everything was my fault. She actually said that I'd ruined everybody's lives because I didn't take a simple joke. Her friends weren't talking to her anymore. She actually moved to another part of town because her friends hated her, and she couldn't stand seeing them every day. She felt completely alone now. I didn't respond. I got some messages from her friends too. They were all pretty aggressive and basically said the same as my ex. They all blamed me for their marriages falling apart. I didn't reply to those either. I just blocked them. I didn't take any pleasure in exposing her friends and blowing up their marriages, but I couldn't help but feel satisfaction in knowing that my ex was paying the price. She did a number on me, I won't lie about that. For a while, I would wonder if she ever really loved me, or if she was just putting on a con from the start. But after exposing her, those questions don't bother me anymore. I think that's the closest thing to closure that I'm going to get out of this whole situation. I don't regret how I handled this one bit. The rapid fire switch from tears to rage to corporate lies to let's talk this out to PSD, poor sad divorce, was whiplash inducing. She basically speed ran the 5 stages of grief but replaced acceptance with gaslight harder. When you told her she could go enjoy the man who gave her a better deal, that was poetry. The now no alimony, beautiful. But the real pièce de résistance? The group chat purge. Honestly, man, you went scorched earth and planted flowers in the ashes. We love to see it. Have you ever confronted someone with proof and still had them deny it? Share your stories with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time.